Dear ladies and gentlemen, it is once more both a great honor and pleasure to follow both the call, the challenge, and the invitation of Professor Vasco Pereira da Silva to take place also in the upcoming edition of the Elpis V-Law Review. The topic in hand would be the Regulation 2021-1119 of the European Parliament and of the Council, establishing the framework for achieving climate neutrality. A topic very much up to date, of course, a topic very much to be seen all together to the famous Paris Agreement. And consecutively, this before mentioned regulation starts by emphasizing, for example, in its recital 7, that climate action should be an opportunity for all sectors of the economy within the Union. And besides that, achieving climate neutrality should require a contribution from all economic sectors, as underlined through recital 10. Therefore, we're finding ourselves within the tradition of the Clean Energy for All Europeans package of the end of November of 2016. And once more, the European legislator wants to point out that the transition to climate neutrality requires changes across the entire not only policy spectrum, but also across all sectors of the economy and society. The latter being, of course, emphasized by recital 25 to the aforementioned regulation. Of course, the European Parliament had already called in its resolution of the midst of January of 2020 on the so-called European Green Deal. And this regulation is, of course, following these footsteps, this path, which obviously is necessary for the further development of, if possible, finding a solution to climate change. The Regulation 1119 establishes a framework for the gradual reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, as Article 1 points out, and the general idea of the whole story would be a climate neutrality objective, emphasized and underlined by Article 4, the so-called intermediate Union climate targets. Because in order to reach the aforementioned climate neutrality objective, the Union 2030 climate target, as worded by Article 4 of this regulation, shall be a domestic reduction of net greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% compared to the 1990 levels, which already were very high. Having that in mind, also the European legislator would like to set a 2040 union-wide climate target. Knowing, of course, that already the 2030 target is a tough one for our societies to achieve, the union-wide climate target of for 2040 will need another legislative activity by the European Union, which will be based on constant assessment of the Union's and the member states' both progress and measures in the aforementioned area. Such assessment, of course, shall commence in September 2023 and shall follow the periodicity of the relevant assessments within the context of the Paris Agreement, showing the necessity of coherence between these two very important elements, both of international Paris Agreement and European law, the Regulation 1119 of 2021. The assessment within the European Union context shall include the best available and most recent scientific evidence, shall also have in mind the social, economic, and environmental impacts, as well as the cost effectiveness and economic efficiency, always having in mind the need to ensure a just and socially fair transition for all. All matters which, especially now towards the end of 2022 and with the current global situation, seem very much to the point and quite critical. In order to conclude this short contribution, I'd also like to point out that the Regulation 1119 foresees for the necessity of public participation, having in mind that also all parts of society, which are of course affected highly by the necessity of combating climate change effectively, should have a saying in the whole process. I'd like to thank you warmly.